So welcome to In the Reading Corner, and this afternoon we are absolutely thrilled to have Geraldine McCaughrean, author of many books, but most recently Where the World Ends, talking to us. Geraldine, we're going to talk first of all today about Where the World Ends. It's a story that is populated with the most compelling characters. There are the boys in the story, 3 grown men. There's the presence of a girl from the mainland and a boy who is really a girl. But there's another character too in this story, and that's the landscape itself. And I wanted to start with the place. I wondered how challenging it must be to write a novel set on what looks to be a completely uninhabitable rock in the middle of the ocean. What can there be to write about, I thought, as I started to read. And then you realise just how much needs to be done on this island, in this microcosm. What challenges did it present to you as a writer?
Yes, it was a challenge to confine all my characters in one place. Generally speaking, characters in an adventure can run around, and you can have a scene set here and a scene set there, and the scenery will be different. Therefore, the scenery not only represents a character within the book, but it could be several characters. The sea itself has always been a good book character because it has so many moods. It behaves like a human being. It wants to devour you. It has a kind of siren call to it. It's inhabited by all manner of spirits below and above. So an island is an ideal place for a book from the point of view that it isolates your characters. And that's been used by any number of writers, this fact that people are isolated. But also it's that place that everybody dreams of. Every reader dreams of their ideal desert island. But I feel a kind of mixture of the two things, that yes, it would be wonderful to have the peace and silence and solitude of that place far out at sea. But there again, you are as much a captive as the Count of Monte Cristo. You cannot escape. In an emergency, you cannot escape. And the boys in the book are held captive. They are distinctly prisoners.
That's a really interesting thought there about the sea, which I hadn't really picked up as being an important character in this story as well. Of course, the sea gives it a dynamic that the island, in a way, can't. And how do you then, once you start to set your book on this real place, start to inhabit that through your writing? Is it somewhere that you had to visit, or is it being conjured mainly through your imagination?
I'm almost ashamed to say that I didn't go to St Kilda in order to write this book. But I shouldn't really, because all of the books I've ever written about very far-flung places, I've never been to any of them. The whole point is that that's part of why I write, in order to take myself off to places that I'm never likely to go. So I never expected to go to St Kilda. But oddly enough, my daughter did. She was taken as a surprise present from Skye on a trip to St Kilda, and came back so full of the place. All this information poured out of her, and she read everything she could find in order to write a play about the place. And she, of course, interested me in it. But she had also, the other thing she'd done was to give me a book by Shalansky. I can't remember what the author's first name is. Shalansky, Atlas of Remote Islands, which is one of the most beautiful books I've ever owned. And St Kilda is in there. Every one of the islands in that book is full of story. Any one of them could inspire a novel. And St Kilda inspired more than any, and all of the stories my daughter was telling me about this place, I just said, "Oh, can I have that one? Can I have that one about the boys? Can I? You're not using that one," because that was the one that captured my imagination most of all. What did those boys think when they were marooned on a sea stack? It wasn't how are they going to survive? Not really, except on the mental front. How are psychologically going to survive? How did they? The sheer physical problem of it, I've no idea how they did survive. But the thing that interested me was more how they survived mentally, because it must have been such an unbelievably despairing situation to be in, because none of the explanations they would have come up with would have been good. So I set out to write a kind of Lord of the Flies. It was a kind of answer to Lord of the Flies. I thought, well, these very religious people, and all right, so the adults might become frenzied, but what would the children who have this simplistic religious belief think? Supposing they set about constructing the ideal society, a utopian society where everybody behaved well towards each other and lived the perfect Christian life while they waited to be taken up to heaven. But it didn't work, because there was no adversary in the story. Apart from the sea and the elements, there was no adversary. And it fell apart. I needed a villain. And I couldn't make the sea into a villain, however scary it is. So it changed entirely from the outset to the finished book.
So I guessed that you were going to say that you hadn't been there, not only on the basis of having heard you talk before, and everybody was convinced you must have been to the Arctic for white darkness, and I know that you hadn't. So I wasn't surprised to hear you say that, but I am in total awe then of how... I know that's what writers do, and they make places they've not been to real, but it's so convincing. So from the point of view that you are now in this place, how does it then become so real? Is it through pictures? Or is it just through... Are you problem solving it for yourself as you're writing? Because, as I say, it's just so present.
Yes, it's exactly. It's both of those things. It is a problem-solving situation. This is what's such fun about writing. I mean, Catherine Rundell takes herself off to the places she writes about. Lots of authors take themselves off there, and so that they can put it. It's tax deductible as well if you go to the place that you're writing about. But I started doing this quite young in life, and it was my means of going to places that I would never visit. Yes, so I take myself off to St Kilda in my imagination, and admittedly, I did a lot of research, and for a far distant rock sticking out of the sea, there's a lot been written about St Kilda. It's a huge obsession of the Scots in particular. So there are a very large number of books about the bird life and the way of life. So I was able to find out a lot about what the life would have been like at that time. Then the camera clicks in. I write like a film camera, and I shoot lots of things in my head, and then I play them back, and I see what happens, because it's self-editing. And the things that stick in my head about the white spirit birds that sit on the roof of a house where someone's died, the first birds that come back after winter, the fact that the boys' feet are shaped like birds because they've almost become birds. Their way of life involves so much climbing. And I can see it in colour, and I can see it in different times of day, but it is an act of imagination. And interestingly, it takes me longer, now I'm older, to shift from one side of my brain to the other, to move into this imaginary world. So it's as if I'm going... I used to get in a high-speed lift, and I could get there in 5 minutes. Nowadays, it's much more like descending into a very deep mine. It's a long ride down until I find myself in my place. I set out to make it hard work, exciting, scary, but I didn't set out to make it very grim and dark. But my editor in particular wanted it darker than it was. So I added in a couple of events in the course of the book, which infinitely improved the momentum of the story. It created much more tension, I think, developed a couple of the characters more deeply, but it did make the book suitable for an older reader. I never set off to write a book for a specific age. I'm not sure, because nobody knows, how old the boys were. But as soon as they were old enough to climb cliffs, they were old enough to work. So some of them could have been really quite young. And I'm reliably assured that the age of the children in the book is the age of the reader who will read the book. So, generally speaking, my characters would tend to be the age of the reader, but I'm not sure that's the case in Where the World Ends. I think perhaps the boys are younger than the reader will be.
And history, as you say, skews that a little bit anyway, because they're grown up more quickly. So, you've already mentioned it and touched on Lord of the Flies. And there were connections in your head as well as in readers' heads with that novel. I'm really interested in the points of difference, and you said in a way as an answer to Lord of the Flies. So there are some key differences here. There's the presence of women, or the female presence in one way or another. We don't have that in Lord of the Flies. In Lord of the Flies, we have privileged children who are suddenly set free on an island. From boarding school, I think. And here we have boys that have gone to work. So that's a point of difference as well. What, in your view, were you doing here in making an answer to that novel?
I wouldn't have said it was deliberate as making an answer to the novel. It certainly didn't turn out that way, to say that boys are gentle. At the risk of digressing a little, there was a while ago a great upsurge in books suited to boys, because boys weren't reading, and can we write books that are specifically for boys? So everybody started writing, me included. It started including motorbikes and racing cars and things that would be of interest to boys. And then along came David Almond and wrote books about the fact that boys are gentle spirits too. They really are capable of gentleness and kindness and thoughtfulness and deep thinking. And they really don't need a motorbike. So, yes, I've always been conscious of that since spotting the error of my ways in patronising boys. Boys are as different as any bunch of people in a room can be different. And that's what I was after, a group of boys who were different in various ways for different reasons. I suspect that the people on St Kilda were very gentle souls, almost entirely. They sang, they worked together, they lived in a very small, tight-knit community. Life was hard, they looked after each other, and I doubt very much whether there was a great deal of difficulty in personal relationships. But of course, in a modern novel, you have to change that. You have to. If you're going to put a group of characters, they've got to be different from each other. But I've got Quill, who's my gentle spirit, the one that tries to make things come right. And I do have the troublemaker, the unkind one, the one who's slightly disturbed, the one who's more violent than others, the one who's more pious. Whereas in the Lord of the Flies, they literally divide into tribes, into packs. So I was not getting into that area at all. But of course, in any group, people polarise towards good and evil. So there's bound to be that kind of wishing that is almost a readerly thing that the reader does in saying, which of these people do I trust, which of these people do I like. It's a sorting procedure, isn't it? It's quite interesting, but readers do sort out the characters and decide which ones they like and which ones they don't. So I'd be interested to know.
It's interesting to hear you say that. You use the word tribe there, and when I was myself thinking about the differences between these two novels, I put family, not tribe. That was one of my perceptions. It felt like family rather than tribal and dividing. There is a point, isn't there, in the story where very early on where you feel it might go that way, where Kenneth bullies Ewan and makes him walk on water. And I thought, oh my gosh, we're descending into that already. And then I thought, no, it's Geraldine, I'm in safe hands. That's not what's going to happen here. And it doesn't need to go further than that, because he's quite shocked by his own actions, in fact, isn't he? I mean, it doesn't transform him into this wonderful, warm person overnight, but he is shocked by his actions, so it's not a clear-cut thing. This is just in my head, and may or may not have anything to do with what's in your head at all, but there were other connections that I made to other books that I'd read. And one of them was Peter Pan, and I felt as I was reading this that these boys were like the Lost Boys as much as they were Golding's boys on an island. They wanted their mothers, and in a sense, that's what John and Merdina, even though she's not there on the island, provide a little bit. And I happen to know that you've written Peter Pan in Scarlet, and I was wondering whether it had been in your mind at all.
That's the first time it's ever occurred to me, but you're absolutely right. I mean, they do say the reason that Peter Pan has never been off the stage since it was written is that it appeals to certain deep-seated story elements that we all appreciate. And yes, it's all there, isn't it? It's the island, it's flying off to the island, and then you've got the female influence, the civilizing influence among these out-of-control boys, and you've got the villain, and you've got the other female interest who is kind of problematic. As much as fun, she's problematic. Goodness me, I wonder how much Peter Pan has inhabited me ever since I wrote Peter Pan in Scarlet. The boy is with me for life.
You're even wearing him as I'm sitting opposite you with a brooch on your jumper there. Let's talk just a little bit more about the characters and the naming of them. The names Quill felt like an obvious symbolic meaning: learning, writing, stories, all those things that you might, birds, quills from birds and so on. Cain also conjures up brutality, and also perhaps a little bit reminiscent of that island or that paradise with Cain and Abel, although there's no murder here, the one that disrupts things in Eden. But what about the other characters that have apparently more generic names? Tell us about the naming of those.
The naming of those was randomly Scottish. I was told by my editor who made me, my original editor who taught me everything I knew about writing, that every character you create, you must start their names with a different letter of the alphabet so the reader can tell them apart. This is almost the extent of my writing, apart from names like Quill. Yes, obviously he was part bird, so he is Quilliam. But when it came to the importance of facts to this novel, the fact that people know a lot about St Kilda and they know a lot about the people that lived there, it was pointed out to me that some of the names were not sufficiently Gaelic. So they were changed So the reasons that I gave, which were for euphoniousness or because of the first letter they started with, or the length or the shape of them, for recognisability, they were changed to different names. So the management accepts no responsibility for the naming of these characters.
You see, I was working too hard on that one, thinking, oh, Ewan, he's of the yew tree, that's the religious, keeping away the evil spirits, but no. I think everybody who reads and has read the book will be in awe of some of the meticulous detail. What I admire in particular is that the detail is always there for the purpose of the story. It's never extraneous, it's not just for word-building exercise. One thing, very simple actually, for instance, was when the guillemots come back to the island, and it's very simple when you say that the guillemot tasted leathery and salty. At a point where those boys, those men on the island, taste must surely have been the thing that they craved. And yet I'm then left thinking, my goodness me, so how does Geraldine know what a guillemot tastes like?
The trouble is I accumulate a huge number of card indexes, postcards, with ideas on and facts and useful information, things happening at the same date. And I compile this huge amount of research, which mostly, generally, I don't use. But by the time I finish the book, I have no idea at all what I made up and what I got off the card index file. So I can't remember whether I know that guillemots taste. I think I do. I think that was a fact. But actually it has more to do with, I was talking about the film camera way of imagining. Well, the other thing is an exercise I do with children in schools is to make them imagine themselves inside somebody else's head in order to identify with the character in the book, which is all we're ever after. Climb inside this person's head and feel what it's like to be them. I get them to see an event like a knight riding into battle, who with a limited amount of vision and with heavy gloves on, and what can he see, what can he hear, what can he smell, what can he taste. And by the time I've got them to picture things, to feel through the five senses of that character, then they cannot help but be physically inside the character's head. And I'm doing the same thing when I'm writing. I don't actually do it consciously, but I do use all the five senses, depending on, as you say, taste would have been really important then. So since I'm inside this book, I'm feeling hungry. I'm feeling really hungry. And sometimes I'm feeling really thirsty. And sometimes I can hear something really dramatic happening or something sinister happening. And if you can do that, if you can apply the senses to a character, it does give you your reader an in.
You talked a little bit about the pacing of the novel and adding in some detail. I wonder whether I would know what those were.
I hope not.
No. But there are moments of great tension there. And again, in admiration of your writing, I think some of those poignant moments, particularly, say, the death of Davy, which was written with such tenderness and such economy at the end as well, with that final sentence, all the more moving for it. Did you have to pare back the writing, or did it just flow? Is that how it felt when you were writing that scene?
That's how it felt. I was there watching that scene. And one of the best magics in writing is when you've created two characters and you put them together in a situation, and then you just sit back and watch and take notes. It's exactly like being in a darkened cinema, watching a movie that you haven't seen before, but you know the actors in it. And amazingly, they will frequently say things that you would never were expecting. And that's what makes us do it, because it's fun. And they come to life or die in front of your very eyes. So that is exactly how that scene happened in my head. There are scenes that I can pick away at and take out the odd word here and rewrite that sentence. But I suppose inevitably the best scenes are the ones that just write themselves.
That's what I felt when reading it. I felt that it was this seamless flowing of a scene as it would have been, and I imagined you writing it straight off. It's from the heart kind of thing, I guess. This was a question from somebody who's going to come to the event this evening, but I thought it might be worth exploring, actually. She's a former teacher and currently researching a project on helping children to find voice and agency in their own writing. And her response to the novel was quite different from mine. So while she was equally admiring of the book, she said she found it relentlessly grim. I didn't find it relentlessly grim. I did find it harsh. But there were so many things to lift you out of grimness there. Did you find it a grim place to be or not?
Quite comically, when I was being driven around Scotland talking about the book on the launch date, we stopped off at a lot of absolutely wonderful independent bookshops. And the bookseller would say, I really like the book, as they always would. But all these people had genuinely read the book and really enjoyed it. And every single one said, it's a lot darker than I was expecting, until it got hilariously funny. We just curled us up every time we got to another bookshop. They'd say exactly the same words. It was much darker than I was expecting. To tell you the truth, it was much darker than Geraldine was expecting as well. But a book has a way of taking over from the author, so it just goes where it wants to go. And added to that, the editor working on it perceived it as a book for older children, which I'm sure she was right about. And I was glad to have put in additional grimness, as it were, because it did add to the excitement of it. So, yes, it is grim. My editor, who made me, he told me that the only difference between adult and children's books is that you have a duty to leave the reader in a world containing hope. I totally agree with him after a life writing and reading books, that there is a profound difference between leaving someone in a universe, a positive universe, from leaving them in despair. A lot of authors wouldn't agree with me. They think you can do anything with a child's psyche while they're reading your book. But I hope that I did give sufficient uplift at the end of the book, not to leave anybody thinking, oh, life is grim. I'm glad I didn't live then.
I'm guessing we might be talking about the wonderful Ron Heapy there at Oxford University Press. And while we're talking about bringing people up a little bit into the light but still keeping it realistic, when did you decide that you were actually going to make this shift in narrative viewpoint at the end and have this final voice coming in?
I've done before going from the past historic into the present continuous, because quite often you want to bring a story up to the present time. I couldn't do that there, but I did want to break a viewpoint of the boys on the island, and in order, I think, I had to round off the story of Medina. I had to. It would have been a betrayal of one of my characters if I hadn't said what happened to her. But I was just simply working towards a happy ending for Quill, and I couldn't give him that out of his own resources. He lacked the resources at the end of the book to have picked himself up from the place that he was in. How did any of those boys how did any of those boys coming back to the main island actually pick themselves up ever again? We'll never know. Their story is in nowhere recorded. So I wanted to give him what he needed in order to redeem his future life.
Just one other aspect that we haven't talked about. You are a teller of stories, and stories play a very key role on the island, both as a means of helping them really to get through the hardship, but they do have a destructive side to them as well. I think at one point Quill talks about the pretty little lies of his storytelling having led to the death of one of the characters in the story. Do you feel that stories are dangerous as well as safe places for us to go to?
No, I don't think I was saying that. No, the stories that Quill tells, he tells for the right reason, to keep the boys' spirits up, give them a sense of identity and usefulness, and to make them feel good about themselves, to make them happy. And stories take you out of yourself when you're in a dark place, and lift you out of a really horrible situation, which is what they're in. For just momentarily, they're somewhere else, as is the reader who's reading the book. So just for a moment, they are on St Kilda's stacks. So, no, I don't. When they become destructive, when Quill says they become destructive, I don't think he's right. I think he's just doing himself down. He feels the responsibility, he feels the guilt, and his wonderful interior world of stories comes crumbling down, and he just thinks, what use are they? So, no, I was never saying that stories are destructive.
Interesting. One final thing, Geraldine. If you were stuck on Stack Warrior, how would you have coped, do you think?
I would have despaired long before they did. I don't like the cold, I don't like the wet, and I'm easily depressed. No, I might have risen to telling stories for a while, but I don't think I could think communally enough. I think those boys could think as one in the way that flocks of birds can, because they were so much like flocks of birds that I think they could reasonably have kept each other going. Whereas these days, people think of themselves as individuals first and part of a community afterwards, and it makes us much weaker, because if it's me, then get me out of here, help me. You're not going to help me? Oh, I'm done for.
That's absolutely fantastic. Geraldine, thank you so much for spending time talking to us today. You've really illuminated this book for me. You've given me so much pleasure, and I know that our listeners will have thoroughly enjoyed listening to you as well this afternoon.
Thank you ever so much.